Thank you, Brad, for that briefing, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be a part of this exciting announcement here in Leduc, and I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. And I'd like to start off by just acknowledging the MLAs who are here with us as well. MLA Dan Williams, Jackie Lovely, Mark Smith, and Martin Long have joined us, which is fantastic. And I'd first like to introduce to you who our speakers are going to be. Of course, Premier Jason Kenney, Minister of Energy Sonia Savage, and Lars DePauw, the Executive Director of the Orphan Wells Association. And I'd also like to thank Total Energy Services for hosting us today and recognize their representatives. Dan Halick, the CEO, Bill Cosick, the Vice President of Drilling Services, and Brad Malley, the General Manager. And of course, the hardworking men and women of Total Energy Services and part of the oil and gas sector who are joining us here as well today. And to tell us more about why we're here in the announcement, it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Premier, Jason Kenney.
Well, thank you very much, Brad, to you and thank you to Total Energy Services for welcoming us here. It's great to be back, and I want to start by acknowledging a dear friend of mine who was an employee of Total who tragically passed away about a month ago, Jason Goodstriker, and want to acknowledge the work he did to help create reconciliation through making sure Indigenous people benefit from responsible resource development, and he did a lot of that through Total, including the last thing that he did, which was hosting a hockey clinic in Slave Lake for Indigenous kids that was sponsored by Total Energy Services. I'd like to thank Dan Halick, the CEO, for having committed to creating an annual hockey clinic in Jason's name to remember him as a great member of this team and a great Albertan who was also a member of our Fair Deal panel. Folks, I'm here today with colleagues to make an important announcement about our blueprint for jobs. We Albertans have been through 5 tough years of economic decline and stagnation. We have seen far too many Albertans lose their jobs and far too many continue to be looking for work. Too many people, especially in the private sector, have seen a significant decline in their incomes, and many are worried about the future, and understandably so. That's why our government was elected on a clear mandate to create jobs, to grow the economy, and to get pipelines built. Those were the themes in last week's provincial budget entitled A Blueprint for Jobs, in which our Finance Minister, Travis Toews, committed to our government releasing a comprehensive strategy for job creation and economic growth in these trying times. And so today I'm pleased to be here to release the Government of Alberta's Blueprint for Jobs, our plan to get Alberta back to work. While we've been through challenging times and we've seen too many people struggling with unemployment, there has been some good news. Last week, the Conference Board of Canada confirmed that their projection that Alberta's economy will grow by 2.2% this year, 2.3% next year. It's the second highest growth in Canada, and most of the banks and think tanks and economists say that we will be leaders in Canadian economic growth in the year ahead. We've seen significant new investments like the $16 billion capital investment announcement by TELUS to modernize their 5G network and expand broadband in Alberta with all sorts of high-tech applications. We've seen new investments in agriculture and agri-food, including the $400 million Cavendish plant in Lethbridge. We've seen the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers project that 2020 will be the first year in 5 years to see positive growth in capital investment in Alberta's oil and gas sector, and with 8% projected growth in investment in the oil sands and 4% in the conventional basin. We've seen Canadian Natural Resources Limited commit to $250 million of additional conventional drilling activity this year, they say in part because of the job creation tax cut introduced by this government, and many other positive signs. However, we are also facing some real headwinds. Most recently, the global instability created by the coronavirus, by COVID-19, which increasingly looks like it will result in a significant global economic downturn. And so that just reconfirms the need for Alberta to move forward with an ambitious plan to renew investor confidence, to get money being spent back in this economy that will create jobs and renew hope for people who are unemployed. One group I really want to point out that has been especially hard hit by the 5 years of economic stagnation in Alberta have been younger men. Men between the ages of 15 and 24 in this province are facing a 17% unemployment rate, and a lot more have actually stopped looking for work. That is bad news for an entire generation, and that it's desperately important that we get working women and men back to work as soon as we can. The blueprint for jobs that I'm releasing today has 5 key pillars. Unleashing the private sector, cutting red tape, building infrastructure, our Skills for Jobs program for skill development, and finally, selling Alberta to the world. Let me say a bit about each one of those. First of all, actions that we've already taken include the partial implementation of the job creation tax cut to reduce our tax rate on job creators by 1/3, from 12 to 8 points, so that we have by far the lowest rate in Canada, one of the lowest in North America. Economists project that this will create at least 55,000 full-time, good-paying private sector jobs and will increase our economy. Next, we brought in an accelerated depreciation for machinery and equipment, very important to encourage additional job-creating investment. We brought balance back to Alberta's labour legislation to make Alberta competitive. We've knocked down unnecessary barriers to trade within Canada, going from 26 to 4 exemptions under the Canada Free Trade Agreement. We've given municipalities flexibility to offer local tax breaks so that we can compete with jurisdictions like Texas and Louisiana that often do that, jurisdictions with which Alberta has to compete for jobs. We have brought in the Royalty Guarantee Act, which creates long-term predictability, stability in our royalty regime to shore up investor confidence. We've taken many other measures. In terms of unleashing the private sector, we are developing a rare earth and mineral resource strategy to diversify the energy sector beyond oil and gas, renewables. We have brought certainty back to our energy markets with a market-only approach to power production, which has resulted in over $2 billion of new investments being announced over the past 9 months in renewable energy projects here in Alberta without one dime of taxpayer subsidies. $2 billion that will help to generate more affordable power prices in the future and create jobs in the meantime. We are developing new investment policies to drive support for startups and early-stage technology companies. We're demonstrating national leadership in renewable energy, as I've mentioned, including geothermal, energy storage, and hydrogen. We are supporting and promoting in this plan Alberta's position as a global leader in artificial intelligence and machine learning, as well as medical and healthcare technology. To give you one example, a team at the University of Alberta 2 weeks ago won an award from NASA recognizing world-class leadership in creating technology that radically helps to improve the transportation of organs for transplants, and this company could become, in the future, a multi-billion-dollar company out of the University of Alberta. In the midterm, we are supporting agriculture to grow Alberta's exports in primary agriculture to 7.5% this year, and in value-added exports 8.5%, to create 2,000 new direct jobs in emerging agricultural sectors. We are growing the forestry industry by up to 1/3, developing a broadband strategy to support regional economic development, and as I mentioned, TELUS's announcement of last November is a key part of that. We're seeking partnerships to expand remotely piloted aircraft systems by leveraging assets such as the aircraft testing range in Foremost in southeast Alberta. We're updating and expanding the mandate for tourism promotion with a goal of doubling the number of tourism visits coming to Alberta over the next decade, and we will be investing in tourism infrastructure and in increased tourism promotion across Canada and around the world. In terms of red tape, we are well underway in our goal to achieving our goal of a one-third reduction in the regulatory burden imposed on the Alberta economy. And I want to thank Associate Minister Grant Hunter for his leadership in that regard. We have set up industry roundtables that are helping us to identify job-killing red tape, and we are working especially with the Alberta Energy Regulator so that Alberta moves from being the slowest moving and most over-regulated economy in Canada to the freest and fastest moving economy in all of North America. We're also cutting red tape internally within government and between the provincial and municipal governments. And later this year, we'll be introducing the Freedom to Care Act, which will specifically cut red tape on nonprofits, community groups, and charities that serve the less fortunate. In terms of building infrastructure, last week's budget revealed that we are maintaining historic high levels of investment in public infrastructure, including a $6.9 billion infrastructure budget this year alone. In the past week, I've underscored a number of those projects that will be funded by that, including $120 million upgrade to the Peter Lougheed Hospital, $100 million in expanding the Red Deer Hospital, and there will be many more announcements to come, especially this Friday, on details on this year's capital plan. But we're also trying to help to prime the pump on more private sector capital investment, prioritizing, and in our own public infrastructure, we're prioritizing investments that support economic growth. And including, for example, Highway 40 up in the Grand Prairie area that leads out to where a lot of the shale gas developments are taking place, as well as to support our forestry industry in the north. We're looking at economic opportunity zones with fast-track zoning and regulatory approvals to attract business, and we will be making a very important announcement later this month about the Government of Alberta's commitment to getting pipelines built, a key part of infrastructure for the future. Our Skills for Job agenda is a very exciting part of our Blueprint for Jobs. It involves reinventing the vocational high schools, encouraging young people to pursue fulfilling careers in the skilled trades, and sending the message that apprenticeship and experiential learning has every bit as much value as academic learning, and that skilled trades have every bit as much merit as professions. That's why we are doubling the number of schools and quadrupling the number of students and full-time apprentices who work with careers of the next generation, increasing support for Skills Canada Alberta and Women Building Futures to get more women into the skilled trades. We're also redeveloping curriculum to improve results in math and sciences, and we've changed the funding formula for our post-secondary institutions to place a greater emphasis on employment levels for graduates. We'll also be building the NAIT Collegiate, and hopefully in the future the SAIT Collegiate as well, to have world-class trades high schools to prepare the workforce for the future. We're also developing the Alberta Advantage Immigration Strategy. We're in consultations on that right now, led by Minister Copping. And today we are opening the Fairness for Newcomers office, part of our plan to make the most of the talents of all Albertans, including those who were born outside our province, outside of our country. We want to make sure they can work at their skill level, quickly recognizing their education, certification, and credentials. Finally, selling Alberta to the world is a key part of the Blueprint for Jobs, and that includes bringing major petrochemical investments here, especially to the Edmonton area. That is why we've extended the Petrochemical Diversification Program, royalty credit, and we are very focused and optimistic about the future of potentially tens of billions of dollars of investment, creating thousands of high-paying jobs in the Edmonton region to add value to our abundant natural gas feedstock. And we'll be promoting Alberta's position as a growing hub for logistics, including significant scope to grow services in both Edmonton and Calgary. And that's why aviation and avionics will be a key part, an area of focus in the blueprint for jobs. Edmonton International Airport is already doing great work in this respect. Our budget included a $75 million commitment over the next 3 years to support our renewed investment strategy. This will include changing the focus of our international offices from strictly trade promotion to inward investment promotion. We will also be expanding our global network of representatives in the United States and around the world. And of course, stepping up our advocacy efforts to defend Canadian energy. We are establishing a target to double tourism spending in Alberta to $20 billion, as I mentioned, and that will be supported by additional promotional work on behalf of the government. So that gives you some of the highlights in our Blueprint for Jobs. It is a living strategy. There are many consultations underway. More details will follow in the weeks and months to come. But today I'm here to make a very exciting announcement about one aspect of the Blueprint for Jobs. As I mentioned, we've got too many folks, especially with oil field experience, who have seen a huge cut in their hours and their work, or who are unemployed. At the same time, we have too many abandoned wells out there in Alberta, and orphaned wells in our basin. And that is why today I'm pleased to announce that the Government of Alberta is extending a $100 million loan to the Orphan Well Association to speed up well reclamation and completion in an investment that will we estimate create up to 500 direct and indirect jobs by decommissioning approximately 1,000 wells and moving more than 1,000 environmental site assessments for reclamation. In the coming weeks, the government will be introducing a full suite of products covering the entire life cycle of wells from start to finish. Minister Savage will have more to say about that. So this is a very important announcement about getting oil field workers back to work right now when we need it. There is more investment coming into the oil patch, and we believe there's a path forward through pipelines. There is a path forward for growth in our energy sector, but we know that we need to give a lifeline to some people who are out of work right now. This $100 million investment, the 500 jobs we believe it will create, will be a difference maker for many Albertans who are struggling right now. I'll now hand it over to Minister Savage, and then we're looking forward to taking your questions.
Well, thank you, Premier. And I'm excited to be here today as we announce this important step in our government's blueprint to get Albertans back to work. We know that the world is going to continue to demand more oil and gas, and we are doing our part. We're doing everything we can to make sure that Canada, led by Alberta, is well positioned to meet this demand. To do so, we are tirelessly working to attract investment back to our province and to help Albertans get back to work. This means having an economic environment where industry can be successful while still making sure that they're in a position to meet their obligations. Meeting their obligations includes bearing the cost of cleaning up inactive and orphaned wells. Because of recent challenges, orphaned wells have become a growing concern in Alberta. And to be frank, it's a situation that needs to be addressed. And Albertans need to know, and they need to count on Alberta to do that. In Alberta, the Orphan Well Association, the OWA, is responsible for helping manage the proper abandonment of oil and gas wells. Since 2001, the OWA, supported by an industry levy, has been safely decommissioning and reclaiming orphaned oil and gas wells, pipeline, and production facilities right across the province. They've been doing great work, and we want to thank them for their effort and commitment. As our first initiative under the recently released, and as the Premier announced, the Blueprint for Jobs plan, our government is increasing the loan to the OWA by up to $100 million. This loan will support and allow the OWA to increase the pace of their work, significantly decreasing the number of orphaned wells across the province, particularly in rural Alberta. And just as importantly, this investment is expected to create up to 500 direct and indirect jobs in the oil services and environmental service sector, providing a great big boost for companies like Total Energy Services. I understand they have 9 rigs out working for the OWA today, and we would be hoping that that amount will be greatly increased with this loan. This additional loan will help create indirect jobs with related suppliers and service providers, including equipment and mechanics, concrete manufacturers, and many others. It also means spin-off economic effects for businesses like restaurants and hotels right across the province as a result of cleanup work in local areas. And not only does this create needed jobs right now, it reduces environmental liabilities across the province. And as I said, our government recognizes the pressing need to turn the tide on growing oil and gas liabilities. That's why, in the coming weeks, I'll be announcing a suite of policies which will address the entire life cycle of wells, from licensing to operations to production to abandonment and reclamations to post-closure and legacy sites. These initiatives together will help maintain our status as a world leader in responsible energy development. At the same time, it will help ensure a competitive, sustainable energy sector in Alberta for generations to come. And this announcement today is an important first step in kickstarting this work. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming here today and for joining us here today.
Thank you, Minister Savage and Premier, for your comments. And now I'd like to introduce Lars De Pauw, Executive Director of the Orphan Well Association, to say a few words.
First of all, I'd just like to thank the Premier and Minister Savage for this loan. The Orphan Well Association has been working hard over the last 3 years to increase our level of activity due to the increase in orphan sites. Also focusing, making sure that our work is conducted safely and increasing our efficiencies. This loan is going to help the Orphan Well Association maintain that momentum while also helping the hard men and women of the Alberta service sector and also reduce the impact directly to landowners in Alberta. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars, for those words. And of course, I just want to go over that this loan, and it's an exciting announcement which is going to mean immediate jobs for folks not only in the constituency of Leduc-Beaumont but across Alberta. As I have door knocked and met with folks over the last year and held round tables, that level of unemployment still exists, and there are people going through hard times. And so it's exciting to hear from the Premier and from the Minister on the exciting initiatives that are happening, not only to support our oil and gas sector, but to get this economy moving as a whole, which is going to mean a tremendous amount to people who just really want a job and be able to support themselves and their families. And so I couldn't be happier to hear about this and to support a government that is so focused on the economy and jobs. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Christine Myatt, who will lead the Q&A. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
I guess my first question might be for Lars, actually. The scale of the cleanup required out there, are we still seeing wells added to the list? Are we seeing shrinking? There was a $235 million loan a couple of years ago. Where are we at right now?
Yeah, so our current inventory, if you include all the sites, is about 6,500 sites. For this fiscal that we're just in right now, we are going to actually see a reduction in those numbers, but we are forecasting that the number of sites going into the next fiscal will continue, unfortunately.
And this one would be for the Premier or the Energy Minister. The Houston Energy Conference was canceled due to coronavirus fears. I imagine we were going to have a delegation at that. Is there concern about maybe the coronavirus hitting Alberta's economy, hitting investment here in the coming months?
Yes, there is. Both Minister Savage and I were scheduled to be at CERA Week in Houston. It's the largest oil and gas conference in the world in every year. And we had set up meetings with the CEOs of many of the world's largest energy companies, as well as the U.S., as well as key leaders of the American government and from foreign governments as well, from the Middle East. So we We were also planning an exciting announcement. All of this planned for next week. Unfortunately, as you've said, Tom, CERA Week has been canceled because of concerns surrounding the coronavirus. Look, it's very clear that the coronavirus situation is affecting the global economy. Massive reduction in air travel, in demand for energy products, and commodities generally will affect us. There is no doubt about this, and we're going to have to monitor that situation. We hope it doesn't get any worse than it is today. I take some solace in seeing a declining number of infections in China, which is where the crisis began. But there are some countries, including Iran and Italy, where I gather we see a dynamic growth in the number of infections. I can tell you that here in Alberta, we have not identified a single case of a coronavirus or COVID-19 infection. I believe there have been about 180 people tested in Alberta, and they've all come back as negative. Dr. Dina Hinshaw, who is the Chief Medical Officer for Alberta, will be briefing our cabinet on Alberta's emergency response to the situation tomorrow. For the time being, we ask people to follow the advice of the Public Health Agency of Canada, which has recommended that people traveling back from certain countries, including China, Iran, Japan, South Korea, and I believe some others, should basically self-quarantine, and that the advice of all public health agencies is that the best form of protection is for people to thoroughly wash their hands as frequently as they can. So that's practical advice that we are getting. But clearly this will affect the global economy. It's going to affect oil prices. It will affect our fiscal situation. It's just one more challenge being thrown at Alberta. And all I can say is that's exactly why we need announcements like today's.
Oui, bonjour, j'avais une question en français. Si vous pouviez nous expliquer comment vos mesures vont relancer l'emploi en Alberta qui n'arrête pas de reculer là depuis au moins 3 mois.
Sure. I'll just translate the question and then give an answer in both languages. The question was, how would I respond to the fact that unemployment has not gone down in Alberta over the past year? We continue to see too many Albertans out of work, and sort of what's our response to that? And I will say that ça, c'est le point de notre plan pour la création d'emplois. Notre plan d'emploi, c'est d'attirer davantage d'investissements avec douzaine des initiatives, y compris celle d'aujourd'hui, pour donner une prête à l'association pour accélérer la réclamation des puits de pétrole. Évidemment, il y en a trop qui ont été abandonnés, qui représentent un problème environnemental, mais une occasion économique, parce qu'avec ce prêt de 100 millions de dollars, on va créer 500 emplois immédiatement pour réclamer et améliorer ces puits de pétrole. Ça, c'est une de nos actions dans le plan. So I'm just saying that, actually, what I just said in French is stuff I've already said in English.
Oui. Je voulais aussi vous entendre sur un autre sujet, les 13 Canadiens qui sont détenus en Éthiopie et qui travaillaient sur une ONG basée à Medicine Hat. Je voulais savoir si, de votre côté, vous faisiez des choses pour éclaircir la situation et si vous étiez en contact avec les familles et si oui, qu'est-ce qui se passe à ce niveau-là aussi?
It's a question about 13 people who've been stranded, and there's something about, they're from Medicine Hat?
L'ONG.
Oh, okay. They're based from a charity based out of Medicine Hat. Unfortunately, it's the first I've heard of that. So I will look into this, and I'll ask Ms. Mayat to get back to you with information. Je n'ai pas de renseignements là-dessus. C'est la première fois que j'ai entendu dire de ça, mais je vais vous informer dès que possible des détails là-dessus.
Hi, my question's still kind of on jobs, but a bit off topic about healthcare physicians. Some rural offices are sounding the alarm. They're saying they're concerned, they have uncertainty about the future. And as recently as today, practice in Drayton Valley said 2 doctors they were recruiting have now decided to either stay in Ontario or go to BC. What do you say to doctors who have that uncertainty about the future?
Well, there shouldn't be any uncertainty. The budget last week underscored that we are maintaining the budget for physician compensation at $5.4 billion, which is a record high. That has grown by 200% in the past 18 years. So the budget for physician compensation in Alberta has more than doubled in the past decade. It has continued to grow at 2 to 3 times the rate of inflation, even while the average private sector family sees their income 8% lower today than it was in 2014. Average physician compensation is up markedly since 2014. This government is not proposing to cut physician compensation. We are maintaining physician compensation at the current budget level of $5.4 billion. We implore the Alberta Medical Association and the good folks that it represents to work with us on a sensible compensation plan that allows us to live within the budget with no cuts, but allowing some greater degree of government control over the billables, because we cannot continue to see, 4, 5, 6, 7% annual increases in an area that represents 10% of our budget. $5.4 billion for physician compensation is 10% of the provincial budget. It is a quarter of the provincial healthcare budget. We value our doctors enormously. Our primary care physicians, our specialists, our rural docs, all of our physicians and other medical professionals. And we want them to stay in Alberta, to come to Alberta, to provide world-class healthcare for our citizens. At the same time, both the McKinnon panel and the Ernst & Young Performance Review of Alberta Health Services, based on data from the Canadian Institutes for Health Information, they all verify that Alberta physicians are the best, most generously compensated in Canada by a country mile. According to the Canadian Institutes for Health Information, an average family physician, general practitioner, makes, for example, their total gross billings are about $96,000 more than their counterparts in Ontario. I've heard some say, well, that's because Alberta has a higher cost of living. That's not true. As the McKinnon panel reported, based on Statistics Canada data, Ontario and British Columbia have a higher cost of living. So our physicians are the best compensated in the country. They enjoy lower taxes than their counterparts in every other province, and a lower cost of living than the other major provinces. So I can't imagine why somebody on a freeze scenario would decide that they're going to be better off financially by moving to a jurisdiction which compensates them less, taxes them more, and has a higher cost of living. So I think there's been, quite frankly, a fair bit of misinformation spread in this debate. Some physicians apparently believe that the primary care physicians that believe that this implies a 30% reduction in their compensation. How could that be possible when there's a 0% reduction in the overall budget for physician compensation? It's just mathematically impossible unless some individuals are I don't know. I can't even understand how somebody could come to that conclusion. So we value, and at the end of the day, what we hope comes out of this is that Alberta will see a significant increase in the number of physicians who are compensated generously through ARPs, which basically means on a per-patient basis rather than a fee-for-service basis. In many cases, this means that physicians who move to an ARP will be compensated more, but in that context, the government will be able to control future costs. Because we have an $8 billion deficit, we just cannot continue to borrow that money forever.
We have some questions on the phone. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
The first question comes from Chris Barco of Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Hi, Premier. I'm wondering if you can address how this loan is going to affect the polluter pay principle for the industry, and is the money enough to make what you consider to be a significant dent in the Orphan Well numbers, or do you think additional loans may be necessary?
I'm going to defer to the expert, Minister Savage.
Sure. I guess first on the polluter pay principle, this underlines and will continue with the polluter pay principle, which is an important part of the whole foundation of the growing oil and gas industry in Alberta, that you clean up your environmental responsibilities. The the number. We anticipate that this could accelerate the cleanup by 800 to 1,000 additional wells, and that goes a long way to getting some of the inventory cleaned up. We're also within the whole suite of policies coming out. We'll be looking at giving some improvements to the OWA, some of the rules that they operate under, so give them some more flexibility to deal with the ownership and control, the sale, the management of their inventory, so that they can be more efficient. So we believe that together those policies will help get a lot of Albertans back to work and a lot of inventory cleaned up.
Do you have a follow-up, Chris?
Yeah, and this one is for the Premier. Just talking about the coronavirus and the impact it has on the economy. If the downturn continues, particularly on oil prices and commodity prices, what should Albertans expect in terms of your response? I know your minister has said that there will have to be some response, but I'm wondering where can you respond and what should Albertans expect?
Well, we are responding today, partly through this blueprint for jobs, partly through this announcement about creating 500 jobs in the oilfield service sector. We need to continue to, even in the context of a potential global economic downturn that reinforces why we need to bring investment back here. I won't hide it. It frustrates me that I think we're doing everything that we reasonably can to get this economy moving again, and yet we're being sideswiped by global events that are beyond our control. But as I say, we always say this, we Albertans are resilient. We get through these things. We'll get through this. And fundamentally, I would just ask people not to lose confidence in Alberta's future. I believe we're going to see substantial progress on pipelines this year, Enbridge Line 3. TransCanada Energy is committed to beginning construction on Keystone XL. We have construction underway on Trans Mountain expansion. I hope that the issues around Coastal GasLink are being resolved. And all of this, and right now, Chris, we are producing and shipping more energy from Alberta than we ever had at any time in our history. This month, I anticipate we're going to see over 500,000 barrels per day shipped on average by rail. For example, particularly after we finalize the crude by rail contract sale. So here's my point. Prices will always go up and down. Our industry is better prepared for a low price environment than it ever has been. They've made lemonade out of the lemons of the 2015 downturn by compressing their costs by, on average, 30%. So our producers operate much more efficiently. They emit less carbon, by the way. And we're getting more and more market access. Right now, incrementally, but I believe within a couple of years, significantly additional market access through pipelines. So we may be in for a bumpy ride as a result of the coronavirus, but that is a global situation. It's not specific to Alberta, and we still have all of these amazing advantages. The youngest and best educated population in Canada, the most productive workforce in Canada, the lowest taxes in Canada, one of the lowest costs of living, certainly amongst the major provinces. We have a government that is making us more competitive with business taxes and red tape, and making strategic investments like the one today. So we're going to fight. Even if it means we're fighting in the face of a global economic downturn, we won't give up.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Next question comes from Don Braid of the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Premier, are you encouraged by the apparent progress on the rail blockade with the First Nations tentative agreement with the government on certain matters that may clear the rail blockades? How do you feel about that, and how long would you like this to take to get this over with, as it were?
Well, Don, I would like for it to have been over a month ago. It's too early for me to say that I'm encouraged because we have not yet seen any of the details in this reported agreement. I hope that the federal government will share that with us and the public soon. Let me just say, Don, that it's my hope that this has resolved some outstanding governance ambiguity around the role of hereditary chiefs in traditional territories off reserve in British Columbia. At the same time, Don, I very much hope that this does not undercut the role or the authority of the elected chiefs and councils in those parts of British Columbia who overwhelmingly, unanimously, and consistently have supported resource development in general and Coastal GasLink in particular. Don, in 2013, when I was the federal employment minister, I went up the Coastal GasLink pipeline route, obviously well before construction began, this is 7 years ago, to offer additional federal training dollars to get young Indigenous people ready to seize the opportunity of those jobs. And every First Nations leader I met along the route was supportive. The grassroots people were supportive. I had the honor of being hosted at one of their feast halls in Houston for the Wet'suwet'en, and all of the elected councillors and chiefs supported the project. So I do hope that if there is an agreement, it will resolve the outstanding friction. But Don, let me, on the other hand, say this. It's obvious that a number of Green left militants have attached themselves to the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chief dispute in an effort to, I think, misappropriate the cause of Indigenous people. Their focus is not on the future of the Wet'suwet'en or Indigenous people. Their focus is on landlocking Canadian energy. So, Don, I regret to say I think we can expect to see continued militancy regardless of any potential resolution on the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chief issue.
Do you have a follow-up, Don?
Oh, that's okay, thanks.
All right, we'll take one more. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Jeff Morgan of the Financial Post. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. It's probably best for Lars DePaul. Lars, you've been doing area-based closures, and specifically there are a lot of older wells in the southern part of the province and around the Leduc area. For this money that you've been that's been made available today, what areas are you looking at in the province for deploying this?
So our focus is going to be on basically private land, so basically everything in the southern part of the province. As mentioned previously, we do think this is going to do about an additional 1,000 wells, so we'll be close to doubling our activity for this upcoming year. So it's going to have quite a positive impact. You know, we're forecasting our next year's activity to almost be equivalent to what we've done in the last 2 years and a bit, so it's a dramatic increase.
Do you have a follow-up, Jeff?
Yes, I do. Yeah, can you also just spell out exactly how many wells you've remediated this year, last year, and how many you're expecting to do next year?
Sure. So last year we did downhole abandonment on about 800 sites, and we're going to get close to 1,000 this year. So we think we'll get pretty close to 2,000 for next year. So I mean, our numbers have been going up, but I think it's important to remember that this does take several years to get across. You know, about right now, over 10% of our inventory is just in the final stages of reclamation and about to be returned to the landowners. And our activity as well on the downhole side is about 15% that are almost completed. So we've been making great progress. The numbers look like they're going up, but they're going to come off very quickly, especially next year.
All right, we'll leave it there.
Thank you.